Thank you for coming by and checking out our brand new channel. My name is Becky.
And I'm Kyle.
And we have decided to start a Booktube channel. We have our own channels anyway, and we'll link those down in the description box. But we have decided that we are going to start a Booktube kind of channel. So one of the reasons that I wanted to start a channel dedicated for books is because I do love books and I love reading, but it's been a long time since I've read a book. It's been close to probably about a year, and that's really terrible and it's very embarrassing. But I do really love reading books, and I found that since Carl and I have been together, we both like similar books, but we also like different books, and we have similar opinions about some and then different opinions about others. So I thought this would be kind of interesting, having a kind of a couple channel sort of thing about some of our favourite books and what we're going to be reading in the future.
I like books, other people like books. Let's make videos about books.
So my favourite genre is definitely fantasy. I've always enjoyed things like, you know, elves and witches and warlocks and vampires and werewolves and, you know, everything else like that. I do like a little bit of sci-fi, so I'm looking forward to reading some more in the future. It's been a long time since I've read anything as far as sci-fi goes. I enjoy autobiographies and biographies, and I just recently discovered today that a lot of people don't know the difference between autobiographies and biographies, so that's kind of sad.
I probably just know a lot of stupid people.
Probably just knows a lot of... Kyle told me that he knew a lot of people that didn't know the difference, so I enjoy autobiographies and biographies. I just find them really fascinating, obviously, especially if it's about someone that I admire.
I knew someone who thought autobiography was a book about someone who made cars.
Oh, seriously? Are you kidding?
No.
That's terrible.
Yeah, he said, I like autobiographies. I said, oh, that's good. He said, yeah, you know, like Peter Brock and, you know, he thought it was books about like people who drove
cars.
and made cars.
Oh.
It's like an autobiography.
That's terrible.
God, I knew some stupid people.
You really know, if you've known some stupid people.
I went to high school.
You went to we all went to high school.
Well, I know.
I also really enjoy children's books, so you know, Roald Dahl, and I like things like Beatrix Potter and things like that. So I really do enjoy a lot of those books that were written for children in mind.
Harry Potter.
Well, yes, Harry Potter is kind of children-like, but I don't know. There's a lot of mature content in there. I wouldn't consider that as cool, you know, children.
I'd say the first two.
I guess
the
sort of
first
young
two,
adult.
The first two are sort of kid-friendly, and then they sort of grew up with the kids. That's the way I feel, anyway. That,
yeah.
You know, she sort of wrote the first couple for the younger kids, and then as the years go on and they get older, then the audience it's aimed at gets older too. Because it would be weird writing about them at 17 for a 10-year-old perspective.
Yeah, it would be.
I think she just sort of wrote them to grow up with the people that were reading them, sort of. But I still think at least the first one is very kid friendly.
Yeah,
It's a lot
well,
lighter
it's kid friendly,
sillier, and sort of funner than some of the other funner.
You just said funner.
Funner.
He just said funner.
Funner.
So I suppose, you know, it is kind of child friendly, but I don't really consider Harry Potter as a children's book. And I do enjoy sort of young adult. I guess I've read a lot of young adult books. Christopher Pike, I suppose, is sort of considered young adult back in the day. Twilight, Hunger Games. They're my two sort of embarrassing books. They're kind of my embarrassing sets. Young adult, things like Unearthly, and there's, young adult. And I really enjoy, well, in particular movies that are based in like the early 1800s, in the Edwardian era, before the Victorian era started, and I know that I would like those kind of books, but I haven't really read any. Like I have Pride and Prejudice here by Jane Austen, and you know, I haven't actually read them, but I know that I'm going to love them. So books I'm not really a fan of is like realism stuff, like those Jodi Picoult, is that what their name is? I'm sure she's a great author, and I'm just not really a fan of those realistic ones.
Some of them aren't bad.
Probably not. I just, like, for me, I think that life outside of, out in the real world is depressing enough. And so books that I would really like to get into is some old-fashioned mystery books, kind of Sherlock Holmes style. I really enjoy Sherlock Holmes, so I'd really like to look into those kind of books. So that's kind of the genres in my life that I like, dislike, and kind of into. What's your favourites?
I really have a genre preference. I guess I more have like I call it more of a stylistic preference more so than an actual genre preference. Like I'm more of a fan of stories with like engaging characters. I like stories about characters. Which, like, I know it sort of sounds weird to say stories about characters because all stories have characters in it, but stories that are about the characters more so than anything else. Like I love fantasy, but
character building books.
Yeah, I guess so. Like I like reading about, and I think that's one of the reasons I really enjoy. I really enjoy writers like Stephen King and Dean Koontz and people like that, because as much as they have interesting worlds and interesting stories, it's more about how the characters interact within the story more so than it's a story to fit the characters, not the characters to fit the story. It's sort of difficult to explain, but I love fantasy, but you read fantasy and a lot of them and Tolkien is really guilty of doing it. It's more about the world than necessarily the characters. Like, as beautiful as the Tolkien stories are, you could literally replace any character in there with any other character and the story really wouldn't change. Like, as much as some of them have some kind of basic defining trait, I mean, you could basically replace Frodo with any generic hobbit and it's pretty much the same story. The story isn't Frodo taking the ring. The story is, look at all the things happening in the world and the relevance that it had to the things that happened in the world thousands of years ago. And it's fascinating, but I prefer a idea, and Koontz does this all the time. Out of all of them, Dean Koontz is probably one of the best at doing it. He will take a inciting and like a moment or a location or an idea. He will place characters within it, and then he'll just let the characters interact with it. And the story is about the characters interacting with it, not everything else external to it. So that's what I really like. So it could be horror, it could be fantasy, it could be sci-fi. Some genres do better than others. I like things like horror tend to be really good at it because good horror is really about people and what happens to people. Sci-fi can be good at it. Sci-fi can tend to get a little too sci-fi for its own good at times. Like, as much as
like,
I
hi,
do...
where's sci-fi? Sci-fi. Look at the robots.
Well, it's like, science stuff,
Yeah.
a little bit of story, science stuff. Like, as much as Arthur C. Clarke is amazing, every book he's ever written is 90% science textbook, 10% story. Which, if you're into that, that's great. But, it's just... What I find engaging is characters and what happened to them. So I don't really have a genre that I just love. Like, I've loved fantasy books, but I've also hated fantasy books. I've loved horror books, but I've also hated horror books. Like, I can't outright say this is a genre I always love, this is a genre I always hate. It's this particular style of writing and storytelling I love. And I'm not as much of a fan of the other ones. So that's sort of not a great answer to that question, but it's not really a question I can answer, I guess.
It is, but I think also it goes with any genre though, that you can, well, it's like anything. You can like one style of music, but then completely hate this band that comes out, because we both love music. So, you can love a particular kind of music, like a style of music, but then something comes out that's in that style and you think, oh, I hate it. So, and I suppose that depends on the artist as well, is because the music, the artist, the performer can be like fantastic and have, like Cohen Cambria, for example, they can write about all these characters and they have these stories and plot lines. Yet if someone else tried to do it, didn't have anything to do with the characters that they in their, in their storylines that they were going to, that they were writing for their song, what's the word called? Concept albums and things like that. So if someone else was going to write it, they're not going to have as much into the character. So even though it's the same kind of style, it's not going to be very good because they haven't really written too much about the
It needs to elicit an emotional response for me, and I tend to be more captured by... When I read a book, I want to not necessarily escape to another world. To me, I find another world more realistic, less by the location and more by the people who are in it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think part of that could be just the autistic mindset. I don't know, like when it's all flowery prose of, oh, the trees towered above him, like raging skyscrapers of emotional torment. To me, it's just like, the trees are pretty.
Of course.
It's like, okay, the trees are pretty.
Yeah.
You know, again, I hate to drop Tolkien because I do love him, but Tolkien is incredibly guilty of spending hundreds of pages literally talking about trees.
Walking.
No one cares that much about trees. There is not a person alive. There is not a sane person alive who has read every single word of Tolkien. Eventually, someone starts skipping pages till something happens again. Right, trees are good, but the only reason I'm going to care about those trees is if there are people walking past those trees that I care about, and those trees have something to do with what's happening to the characters. I am going to quote Matthew Riley, because he said it best. Matthew Riley, favourite author. That's not even a question, but I'm going to say it anyway because his book is right in my hand. You are an author, you're writing words. If the words are not important, do not waste time by putting them in the book. That is why Matthew Riley is so good. There is literally not, doesn't matter how big the book is, there is not a single word in here. Shut up. There's not a single... Seriously? There's not a single word in this book that is not 100% completely relevant to the story in some way, shape or form. Everything that he describes, everything that he talks about is only things relevant to what is happening right then, right that second. And to get away with that, instead of describing... Instead of describing things, he just tends to... He's got a friend who does illustrations for him. He just does everything in diagrams. This is a diagram of what's going to happen. Unless someone is literally walking from one point of something and something is happening, he will not mention what the room looks like whatsoever. So there you go. There's your diagram. Wow. That's what the room looks like. Done. Don't have to waste any words.
See, I think that, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I might say that I love fantasy, but it doesn't mean that every single fantasy book out there is going to be great and I'm going to love it just because it's fantasy.
It's hard to talk about broad favourites.
Yeah, it is. It's really hard because, I mean, yeah, I like fantasy, but there are so many fantasy books out there that I haven't read, and there's probably a lot out there that I would read and I absolutely hate it. It's still got to feel something to me, and where I might enjoy something for some reason, someone else might not enjoy that for that reason. It's, the same reason. When I say about genres, I'm just sort of typically saying that that's what you're going to hear from me is from those styles of books. We had to change phones. Mine's decided that I had too much on there. So future books that I want to read, I haven't bought it yet, but it's a book called Elsewhere by... you see that? Elsewhere by Gabriella Zevin. And I saw that on a fellow like booktuber, and it just looked fantastic. It looked really good. It was basically about a girl who dies, and she goes to sort of like an afterlife, and they apparently start to age backwards. And then once they turn 7 days old, then they're reborn onto Earth as a baby again. So,
can I just talk about the review that they've put on the cover here?
What?
From the Sunday Telegraph, which is just brilliant. So convincing, you find yourself wanting to read the book backwards when you're finished.
How do you read the book backwards?
Well, I mean, she ages backwards, so maybe they thought if they read the book backwards, it'd...
Who wrote that?
Sunday Telegraph.
Oh.
Quality book reviews there, everyone.
Well done, Telegraph. That's fantastic.
The book backwards.
Wonderful.
Maybe I'll read your paper
review.
backwards, it'll start making more sense.
Oh, God. So that's the book that I want to buy next. It's been a while since I bought myself a book, actually. But, yeah, I'm going to be buying Elsewhere. But in the meantime, I am going to be rereading Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I'm going to go from this all the way on because it's been a long time since I've read the older, the newer books, I guess, But other than that, if I haven't gotten started on that before Elsewhere, then it'll be Pride and Prejudice, because unfortunately I haven't actually read Pride and Prejudice. I've started it, but I haven't actually passed probably the first chapter, or not even the first chapter. So, have you thought about a book that you're going to read, that you're either going to read that you haven't read yet?
Well, I was saying I did want to get those Tracy Harding books if I could. I have read them before. It was a long time ago. I'd love to check out any of her books. Really, I really enjoyed her writing style and I really enjoyed them. So I'd like to reread them. But a book that I would like to read that I haven't read, I really would love to get some Lovecraft books. I really would like to get some H.P. Lovecraft books finally, even if it's just one of his short story collections, or Shadows over Innsmouth, or one of the typical ones. I enjoy the Lovecraftian style, and I really enjoy things that are based off the Lovecraftian style, and I've been enjoying Bloodborne and Lovecraftian games. I've basically spent so many years of my life immersed in Lovecraft and Lovecraftian style and Lovecraftian lore without actually having ever read the original stuff. Like, I know most of the stories back to front, I know most of the mythology, but I've never actually had the pleasure of reading his own written works, because a lot of them are really hard to get your hands on. A lot of them are collector's items. Libraries don't tend to stock them. So if I had the virtue of buying my own books, I'd love a really nice collection of Lovecraft books. I want to complete my Matthew Riley collection just because I want to have all these books, because they're just so easy. When you want to read something and you're like, okay, I just want to read a book today, I want something light and easy that's engaging and fun to read, then Riley's basically your best bet. There's a few authors that I'm basically like, I probably wouldn't buy their books, but I grab them if I saw them at the library. Frank Peretti, Feist.
So behind us is actually our bookshelf and the books that we own as both of us as adults. Our children have their own shelves, their own books, and we do have very little books. We've just currently downsized and gotten rid of books that we don't actually love, to either sell, get rid of, and just to pass on to others who might enjoy them as well. Basically just to sort of make way for new books to come in and things like that. So, I don't think that's
really practical.
It's not practical right now, because we live in a 2-bedroom house. We have, we've got a 7-year-old. We have a 4-month-old.
Baby that's about to start crawling.
Yeah, so right now it's not practical to have, the walls and walls of books and things like that. And we don't really have that sort of storage. So yeah, our bookshelf is really small. It's, there's not, I think I counted about 55 books between both of us. And that's just basically what we have at the moment. We downsized because we wanted to make way for new books, and sort of, we're adventuring into a bit of a minimalist lifestyle at the moment, which is very practical for us at the moment. Okay, so we're going to go for now. We've finished rambling, and there's a lot of editing to do. So anyway, so that's us. I'm Becky. It's Kyle. Our other channels will be linked in the description box, and I hope that if you've watched this video, you've enjoyed it, and that you'll come back and see what we've got to say in our next video. So that's it. Okay, bye everybody. Talk to you next time.